Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's meeting. I would like to call the meeting to order. The time is now 9:01 a.m. And Stephanie, would you please take attendance?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Adrian Cochran has not joined us yet. Andrea Comer has not joined us yet. Ellen McKitterick.
Ellen, we didn't hear you, but we do see you.
Oh, present.
Thank
Here.
you.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you. John Scott,
Here.
Mike Stoltis,
Here.
and Holly Williams.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And I'd like to thank the members of the public who are joining us this morning for our meeting. Our first order of business is the approval of the February 28th, 2025 meeting minutes. So I'd like to ask the committee for a review of the minutes and a call to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. And a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions?
I will abstain.
Thank you. All right, so the motion carries. We're now going to move. Oh,
I'm so sorry, but I just wanted to note that Adrian has joined us.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
I guess I'm abstaining because I don't know what we're voting on.
It
So-
was the minutes.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
from the February meeting. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
All right, so then the motion carries. Thank you. And Dave, you're going to walk us through this morning a review of the draft budget for the fiscal year 25-26.
Yes, I am. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us.
You can see your screen, Dave.
Thank you very much. Okay, so as some of you know, it is budget time again, certainly for the state of Connecticut, but also for the Connecticut Paid Leave Authority. So we will be going over our proposed budget for the following fiscal year ending June 30, 2026. Just an overview, as you may be aware, our budget takes up three components. There's the operating budget, which covers the expenses for the Connecticut Paid Leave Authority, so it can run. There's the bond budget, which the money is used for. Sorry, heard a weird glitch for a second there. There's the bond budget, which covers expenditures for IT platforms, building them, making necessary enhancements, things of that nature. And then there's the contribution budget, which budgets for the contributions coming in, but also for the benefit payments going out and the administrative fees for both the authority and the third-party administrator of benefit services. So we're going to start with the operating budget. And so first we'll go over what the budget is, and then we'll go over the major assumptions, and then we'll do a comparison of the budget compared to the prior year budget and the most recent projection for the fiscal year 2025, just so everybody has a sense of what the changes are in the budget and why they are. So we'll start with the what. The operating income budgeted revenue for the year is just under $16.7 million. That's made up of the administrative fee, which is $16 million of that number, and which is paid from the contribution fund, and fund recovery penalties, which are the remaining approximate $700,000. The expenses for the authority are budgeted to be at just over $16,856,000. Those cover expenses that you're, I'm sure, familiar with right now, including salaries, fringe, and pension for the authority's employees, the contact center, which provides support for Connecticut state employers for any questions they have, IT support for the various platforms we have, outreach and engagement, which is all the fine work that Jessica does and updates the board on quarterly, including our new community education coordinator initiative, grievance adjudication, which is the appeals work that our partners at DOL do for us, and various software licenses we have for the platforms we have. You may hear us mention things like Salesforce, which is the platform that the employer contributions are on, ForgeRock, which is what employers use to sign on. That is also the sign on for other state agencies as well. So there's one sign on for everybody. The Blackthorn license, which is what we use for employers to make payments. So various things like that. We accept contributions electronically. And so, as you might imagine, we need various platforms for that. Now, as you see, the expenses are about $160,000 more than the revenue. So we've asked, as part of the budget, for there to be a carry forward from operating reserves. So we will have operating reserves at the end of fiscal year 2025 that were unused. We have about $14 million of operating reserves. So we want to use about $160,000 of that for next year's budget. The remaining amount we are proposing to put back into the contribution fund because the contribution fund earns interest. So it just makes sense to take that money and put it back into the contribution fund where it can earn interest. We're not expecting to use those funds. We have a current budget here, so we're going to live by that. And we haven't done that in the past in terms of putting the unused money back into the contribution fund, but it makes sense to, because if we were a typical state agency, we would be returning any unused funds back to the state's general fund. We're not an agency. We don't send money to the general fund. We don't get any money from the general fund, but we do have the contribution fund. So we would return the money back there. So that's what we're proposing to do. Let's talk about some significant assumptions behind those numbers. The administrative fee revenue is $16 million. Historically, we budgeted as $20 million. But as you might recall, we have not transferred that whole $20 million over. In fact, for the past 3 fiscal years, we've only transferred over $15 million. And so since we're not expecting to have $20 million of expenses, we've lowered the administrative fee down to 16 to reflect that historical trend. The revenue for the fund recovery penalty is based on historical trends that we've seen. We've got about 1.5 years of data now since we started the fund recovery process. So that is how we came up with that budgeted number of about $700,000. The salary amounts are budgeted based on a few things. Number one, we have a couple of new positions that we have in the fiscal year 2026 budget. So that will get us up to 49 full-time equivalent employees by the end of the fiscal year. We also have salary adjustments in there, 2.5% for the annual cost of living adjustment. That happens in July. And also we have the step increases budgeted that happen in January. Those are based on the existing current contract that the state has with CBAC, which stands for the State Employees Bargaining Agent Coalition. Now, that contract does end on June 30th of 2025 this year. It's currently being renegotiated. We're assuming that the same increases that the state has had for quite the past few years will be in place for the new fiscal budget. So we have budgeted accordingly based on that historical trend. Fringe benefits made up of two components, healthcare and the pension. The total fringe benefit rate we're budgeting is 76%. 24% of that is healthcare, and that's based on the historical trend that we've seen. And 52% is for the pension obligation. The current rate we're paying now is about 47% and change. That rate does change every year. It hasn't been announced yet what that new rate will be. We did contact the Office of the State Controller, OSC, for some guidance. They did indicate that the rate will go up. So we have budgeted at 52%. The guidance that OSC provided was a little lower than that, but we're being conservative because, like we said, that percentage is not set in stone. So that's why we went with 52. Outreach expenses include the CECI, the Community Education Coordinator Initiative. It includes that for the whole year this year. Last year's budget only had it for about half the year. Last year, we did budget about 12 vendors. We only came up with 7. So we are budgeting for at least 7 the whole year. And in fact, by the end of the fiscal year, we have budgeted additional vendors and partners as well to assist us with that initiative. So that's part of the outreach number. And then, of course, there's IT support work. That includes work on our various platforms, claims analysis, security, of course, fund recovery work, website maintenance, all that good stuff that goes into it. Let's talk about how the current budget compares to last year's budget, which is the second column that you see in the spreadsheet. And then towards the right, there's also a column for fiscal year 2025 projection, which is our latest projection of where the numbers will fall on this fiscal year. I know there's a lot going on in this spreadsheet, so just bear with me for a few minutes as I walk through the significant changes. So let's start with revenue. We're proposing to budget for 2026 revenue of $16.6 million. Last year, we have budgeted $20.3 million. As I said before, that decrease is because we never transferred the entire $20 million. So we're budgeting closer to our expectation. Let's talk about how expenses for the 26 budget compare to last year's budget. So we are budgeting just under $1.6 million less expenses for 2026 than we do for 2025. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Dave, right? But why is that? Okay, so the largest component is IT consultant services. We have budgeted $1.2 million less than we did last year. Why? Because as it turns out, we were able to use a lot of that money from bond funds because it was for primarily system enhancements, which is what the bond money can be used for. So we continue to expect to do that in 2026. We will need more consultant services for maintenance and things like that than we have in the past. But that's the primary driver, and that's and that's $1.2 million of the difference. Other differences contributing are the pension rate. Last year's budget, we had budgeted at 60% for the pension overhead rate. It turned out only to be 47%, which was a positive change for us. And this year, we only expect the pension to be 52%. So that's why the pension dollar amount is going down by about $275,000. Moving down, software licenses, we're budgeted at $383,000 less. That's because of two things. Number one, we were able to utilize the buying power of the state for Salesforce, and so we paid less money for that. And number two, because of the work we have been doing on fund recovery, making custom enhancements, we don't need an outside license for the custom recovery platform work anymore. So that's an expense we don't need. So that's why we're spending less on software licenses. Consulting services will be less by $108,000. That's because we are using less than we thought we would be last year. So that based on historical trend. So that's going to be lower. The contingency. We traditionally have budgeted $250,000 of contingency expense for unexpected expenses, and we don't know what we don't know. Historically, we haven't used very much of that. So this year, we're taking down the contingency $150,000 to $100,000. Grievance adjudication. We've seen a downward trend in that in terms of historical analysis. The appeals work that's being done by DOL has gone down in the past year. So we have taken down the expense accordingly based on that trend. So those are the main drivers of why the expense is going down. There are some increases budget over budget. Payroll is going up for reasons I just described. Cost of living adjustment, headcount increase, annual step increases, things like that. The benefits will also go up in accordance with that. And then we expect to use some more temp services in 26 than we do in 25. So that's why that number is higher. So those overall are the contributing factors of why this year's budget is lower than last year's budget. That's step one. So step two, I just want to look at the fiscal 26 expenses of 16.8 and how they compare to our projection of $14.1 million. In other words, our expenses are budgeted at $2.7 million than what we project for the current fiscal year. And why is that? Well, payroll, benefits, and pension are all expected to go up. As I mentioned, payroll and benefits are going to go up because we have pay adjustments and increases, new positions, and we also have some open positions in 2025 that are expected to be filled by 2026. The pension rate, as I mentioned, will also be expected to increase from 2025 to 2026. So that's why that's going up by an expected $629,000. Outreach and engagement, like I said, the CECI program will be in existence for a whole fiscal year this year, not just a part of it. And we expect to have more partners in that program by the end of the year. So that's why that's going up. IT consultant services, we expect to use more of those for more maintenance type of things. So that's why there's a budgeted increase in there. Other significant expenses include the contingency. We're not expecting to use the contingency in 2025, but we still like to have it in next year's budget. So that's why there's that $100,000 increase. Grievance adjudication, we do expect it to go up somewhat because of increased benefit payments. So we want to make sure we're covered for that. And like I said, we expect to use more temp services next fiscal year than this fiscal year. So all those things contribute to the increase of why next year's fiscal budget is expected to be higher than what we're expecting to spend in fiscal year 2025. Okay, thank you, everybody. I know that was a lot, but I appreciate you going over with that. There's a lot going on, and I just want to make sure everybody understands the various components of that. The bond budget is a little simpler. So we expect to have about $1 million remaining in available bond funds of the original $16 million that's been allocated in the past. We are not budgeting for any additional allocations this year because we're expecting to use about $500,000 in bond money for the next fiscal year. And that is for continued necessary system enhancements to things like the contribution platform, security, the fund recovery website, things we've mentioned in the past that we will continue to work on and make sure the systems are kept up to date. Okay, the contribution budget. Again, we're going to talk about what makes up this budget, what the significant contributions are, and what the changes are compared to prior year budget and latest projection. So the payroll contributions that we're budgeting for are going to be budgeted at $490.2 million. And then there's also some fund recovery money we're budgeting that consists of fund recovery contributions and interest. That's another almost $2.8 million. And then investment income, we're budgeting at $23.3 million. As far as expenses go, we are budgeting for benefit payments at $475.3 million. And yes, that number, as well as the contribution number for that matter, we definitely worked with our actuaries to come up with these budgeted numbers. And we are definitely taking into account the higher activity we've seen. And in fact, we redid our numbers as recently as December of 2024 to reflect the higher activity that we've seen in benefit numbers. The administrative fee we pay for claims and benefits to the third-party administrator is budgeted at $25 million. That's actually consistent with prior years. We'll get to more of that in a minute. The administrative fee for the paid leave authority is $16 million. We went over that before, so this is the same number. It better be if we want the books to balance. And the bond repayment is budgeted at just under $2 million. All this activity nets to just under a $2 million decrease in the bond fund from about 585.6 to $583.6 million. I do realize it's a decrease. We have budgeted for decreases in the contribution fund before, so it's not unheard of. We do err on the side of caution when we budget, so that's why there's a relatively small decrease in the contribution budget this year. But let's go behind the assumptions of that and what make up the significant factors. So contributions coming in of $490 million. That includes about a 4% salary growth and any projected changes in unemployment. Again, we did work with our actuarial partners on that in helping us come up with this number. Fund recovery, as I mentioned before, that's based on our historic collections that we've had in the past year and a half. Investment income of $23.3 million. That is based on an interest rate of 4.1%. We did work on our partners at OPM, Office of Policy and Management, for their guidance on what their expectations are interest rates will be for the coming fiscal year. And so based on that, that's how we came up with the 4.1%. Expense assumptions, benefit claims. Those are based on the actuarial projections as of the second quarter of fiscal year 2025, i.e. the quarter that ends in December. Based on that experience report, there's also an increase in the incidence rate to about 4.7%, and that's higher than the incident rate that we have now, which is about 4.6%. That doesn't sound like a big increase, but it is significant enough when you consider that the incident rate is a percentage of the potential number of people that can use the plan, which is about 1.5 million people in the state of Connecticut. So we did bump up that incident rate as we have seen continued growth in the number of payments and number of claims that are being paid. So we're certainly happy to see people using the program. The benefit administrative fee that is budgeted at $25 million is based on historic cost and the contract thereof, which does allow for a price increase on January 1. As you may remember, there is a RFP that's out there right now. It's still ongoing, but we have also budgeted based on the RFP response. It is still under negotiation, but we do believe that we have enough based on what we've seen from that RFP response in the budget to cover that fee. And like I said, that fee is consistent with what we have budgeted in the past. The administrative fee, like I mentioned, same as the operating budget, and the bond fund repayment that was based. The total amount was originally $16 million. And so that's roughly $2 million comes right off the payment schedule that we agreed on with the state a few years ago. So that's set in stone. Looking at the contribution budget, and again, how it compares to last year's budget and last year's latest projection. So the contributions are expected to go up over last year's budget. Again, that's primarily driven by expected salary growth. So that's where the $25.8 million comes in. The investment income is slightly less than last year's budget by $400,000. That's because the benefit payments that we're paying in fiscal year 25 were greater than what was budgeted. So that lowers the base of what you can earn interest on. And since we know that's lower, then that's why the investment income is slightly lower. So that's why that number is somewhat negative. Benefit payments, as everybody I'm sure is aware by now, the actual benefit payments that were being paid out were higher than what we originally budgeted a year ago. And that's why we went to the actuaries and asked them to update their numbers. And so they did. And that's why this year's budget is $96 million ahead of last year's budget. And the administrative fee, as we discussed before, is $16 million closer to expenses. So that's why that's down. And again, similar stories in terms of looking at the fiscal year 2025 projection. Our contributions are expected to be about almost $16.7 million more than where we expect them to be at the end of fiscal year 25. Again, driven by salary growth. The investment income is expected to be lower by $2.7 million. And that's because the budgeted interest rate of 4.1% is less than what we're going to be earning in 2025. We're earning about 4.4% right now. And in fact, at the beginning of the fiscal year, we were earning almost 5.4%. The interest rates have come down, and the expectation is they will go down further in the next fiscal year. So that's why the investment income is going down, because it's a function of the lower interest rate. Benefit payments, as I mentioned, they're expected to go up in the next year, in part driven by the increased incident rate, and the administrative fee will be somewhat higher, but again, closer to the money that we've drawn in the past. Okay, so what happens next? Our plan of operations calls for a 31-day period for the Finance Committee to review and comment. The Finance Committee can reduce that period with a majority vote. Why am I bringing that up? Because our next scheduled meeting for the Finance Committee is in 28 days, exactly 4 weeks from now, and not the 31 days. So we're recommending that the committee vote on a motion to reduce the review and comment period to 28 days, which is the next scheduled meeting. If the committee decides they do need the 31 plus days, we can schedule a special meeting to occur after the 31st day. Either way, the goal is to finalize the budget with the Finance and Audit Committee at the next meeting, which is either April 25th or a day after that, depending on the outcome of the vote. After that, the budget goes to the board. And at the May meeting, we would, after reviewing the budget with the board, we would ask them for a vote to approve. Historically, that's what the board has done. But if there was a case that the board decided that more time was needed, the board would have until May 31st to approve the budget, again, because that's what's in the plan of operations. So we would ask the board in that case if they want to schedule a special meeting on or before May 31, or the board has the option to decide to wait until the next regularly scheduled meeting on June 12th and decide to vote on the budget then. But either way, the budget will be done, is expected to be done, certainly by the end of the fiscal year. So we are ready on July 1 for the new budget. So I know that was quite a bit, but like I said, the budget is important. So I wanted to spend just I was going to say a few minutes, but quite a few minutes going over it. And I'm happy to take any questions at this time that anybody has regarding the budget. And thank you for your time sitting through that. I do appreciate that. Any questions at this time?
So before we go to questions, can I just kind of clarify for a second? So if
Of
anybody
course.
has questions on the budget material that was presented to Dave, we can entertain those first. And then we, as the Finance Committee, can move to consider a motion regarding the review and comment period.
Correct.
So maybe we just first stick to questions about the budgeted content, and then we can pivot and deal with the motions separately, so we're not kind of intermingling everything together. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. All right, my type A brain needed to separate the two. All right. So
Thank you, Holly.
any questions on the financials that were presented with regards to the budget for this upcoming fiscal year?
I just have one question.
Yes, Mike.
Hello, Dave.
Hello.
You talked about the projection of expenses for this fiscal year, 14.1, budget 16.8, 2.7 million delta. I'm just curious, and then you listed some of the components of that delta. Do you know how much of that delta is due to payroll and benefits?
Yes. So that I just went back to the sheet here. Hopefully you could see it on the screen. So the delta of that is the 751,000 plus the 190,000 plus the 629,000. So that is about $1.6 million is the delta of the 2.7.
So more than half.
Yes,
Yep. Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions?
I can just add, you'll obviously have these materials to review during the month. Um, however long you want to do it. If you have questions in the meantime that you don't want to wait until the next meeting, you're welcome to email Dave and me, but just ask that you don't email the committee because we don't want to have an illicit virtual meeting.
Yes, absolutely. Happy to answer any questions in the interim.
All right, if there's no further questions on the recommended budget, then we'll move to, or I'm gonna ask for a motion to reduce the review period for the finance committee to 28 days, given how our meetings fall.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. And then we're gonna move on. Dave, you again, a budget review of spending to date. Thank you.
Okay. Here we go.
We can see your screen, Dave.
Thank you for the verification, Stephanie. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go over the results through the period of February 2025. Net activity for the month of February was just under a negative $958,000. That is a $445,000 positive variance. Significant expenses continue to be payroll and related expenses of $708,000, outreach expenses of $176,000. That's a little higher than usual because we are paying for the community initiative fund, and we actually paid for multiple months as we caught up with those. And there was the contact center of $132,000. So that makes up the bulk of the $1,055,000 expenses that we had for the month. Part of the positive variance was also due to better than expected fund recovery activity. We had a $55,000 positive variance there for as well, because we got $97,000 of penalties. Year to date, our expenses are $8.8 million. That is just under a $3.4 million positive variance. We do have a negative $1.4 million variance for net activity, but again, that's because we didn't transfer the $5 million as revenue because we didn't need the money, so we kept it in the interest-bearing account. Moving on to bond funds, we didn't spend any bond money this month. We actually paid at the very beginning of March. So that's why we have a positive variance this month, and we have a $79,000 positive variance year to date in bond money. That's expected to correct itself in March, assuming we make the two payments in March, including the one we were supposed to make in February. That means the bond money available to the authority continues to be $1,665,000. Moving on to contribution activity, that was a negative almost $32.5 million for the month of February. That was an over negative $3.5 million variance compared to the budget. Again, the main driver of that is benefit payments. That was over almost a $4.5 million variance. Our benefit payments for the month of February were almost $33.9 million. That averages about to $8.5 million a week. That is a higher rate than what we saw in January. Typically, we do see a lull in January, and then it starts picking up again in February, which it did. So the February rate is actually similar to the December run rate we had of $8.5 million. Other activity for the month of February was our contribution revenue was $675,000. That also had a positive variance of 228. Our fund recovery activity was also positive by almost $400,000, and our investment income continues to be positive as well. Year to date, our activity is just over $33.6 million. That is over a $23 million negative variance. Again, that's because of the higher benefits we're paying than we had budgeted almost a year ago. What does that mean for the contribution fund? Oops, sorry, hold on a second. Our contribution fund is just under $600 million as of the end of February. Just a quick review of the balance sheet. We have $618.6 million of total assets. Over $582 million does sit in the short-term investment fund, where it's currently earning about 4.4%. And other significant assets are the bond funds available I talked about were $1.6 million. The operating funds of $14.8 million that I had mentioned before when I was talking about the budget. Fixed assets continue to be $2.4 million. That doesn't change till the end of the fiscal year. And our obligations out are $12.8 million. And that is for both the short-term and long-term portion of the bond money that we owe to the state. And projections for the end of the year, we expect our net activity to be over $1.5 million. That's $357,000 negative variance. Again, it's negative because we didn't transfer the $5 million as for the fee to the authority. But the good news there is that's because our expenses expect to come in at $14.1 million compared to the original budget of 18.4. So that's over a $4.3 million positive variance for the operating projection. And contribution wise, we expect our net activity for the year to be just under $14.6 million. That is over $48.5 million, less than what we had originally budgeted. But again, benefit payments were higher than what we budgeted a year ago. And so this is the trend we expect to see through the end of the year. We expect benefit payments to be $446.5 million. And we do expect the contribution revenue to be over $473.5 million. So that's where we are for February and where we expect to be at the end of the fiscal year. Again, I'm happy to take any questions at this time from anybody regarding the financial results.
I don't see any questions. All right, thank you, Dave. We are now going to move on to our actuary RFP update.
Thank you again, Holly. So as you may remember, a couple of months ago, we discussed our plans for the actuary RFP update. It's required every 3 years by the authority. So what have we done? So in February, we did issue an RFP for actuarial services. And in that RFP, there was the ability for potential candidates to send questions and have them posted publicly for to be answered. So we did get some questions from some potential candidates, and those responses were posted in February. The proposals were due on March 6th. We did get some proposals. The review committee, as you might expect, did review them and read through them and discussed them. And so as a result of that, there will be some interviews with some candidates, and those are scheduled for next week. After those meetings, the review committee will finalize their scoring of the potential candidates and present a recommendation to the board in an executive session as is appropriate, and seek a vote at that time for the recommendation. And then assuming that the board agrees with our recommendation, the contract negotiations will begin with the winning candidate for actuarial services. So that's where we are with the process right now. Again, happy to entertain any questions.
I just actually had one question.
Yes, Holly.
What is the timeline again for us to finish and finalize the review process for the new actuaries?
For the new actuary. So the timeline is for the board at the April board meeting, which is scheduled for April 10th. The timeline is to have the recommendation presented to them, to the board, including you all, obviously, at that time.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions? No? All right. So we move on. Is there any old business this morning? Don't see any. Any new business? No. Quiet group this morning. All right, so may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Any second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, wonderful. So the motion carries and the meeting is adjourned at 9:49 this morning. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.
Thank you. You as
Thank you,
well.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks, Dave.